I would like to call to order the Board of Assessment Review Tuesday, January 21st. Meeting to order. And could we have a roll call of those present, please?
Mrs. Fuente? Here. Mr. Herrick?
Here.
Mr. Conzo?
Here.
Mr. Frothingham?
Here.
Mr. Peoples?
Here.
Mr. Parkinson?
Here.
Thank you. May we all rise and salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from January 7th, 2014 Board of Assessment Review.
I have one question on those minutes.
Yes, sir.
Page 2, the fourth paragraph, bottom line. After the $400,000, the word "of" should be "over."
Let's see. That's correct. You're right. Thank you, Bainey, for picking that up. Any other noted items on the agenda? Can we make that change? Okay. Thank you very much. So do I have a motion to accept the January 7th minutes as amended?
So moved.
Thank you. Have a second? Chris, second. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? Carried. All right. The next item that's not on the agenda is a motion to enter into the executive session. I move that the Board of Assessment Review enter into an executive session pursuant to 1 MRS Section 4056E to discuss its legal rights and duties with its attorney. Do I have a second to that motion, please?
I'll second it.
Alex, second. All in favor? All right, none opposed? We're in executive session. Thank you.
Are you guys leaving or are we leaving?
I think we're going to leave.
We're going to leave. There's a conference.
I'll motion.
Oh, Chris is not here. Sorry. Chris, sorry about that.
Yeah, we don't like that guy anyways.
I didn't even see you to my right there. I'd entertain a motion that we come out of executive session, please. Bainey, you have a motion and you second it? Kathy seconded it? Okay. We are currently out of the executive session.
You gotta vote on the motion.
Oh, thank you. Can we vote on that? All in favor of coming out of executive session? All right, none opposed. Okay, which brings us to the main item on the agenda tonight, which would be our deliberation on Attorney Block and Attorney Dale's Trout Neck waterfront appeals. Before I do that, I would like to take a moment and read the standards of review and the burdens of proof of the property tax appeal hearing into the record. This is where we will focus our attention tonight and to come to some sort of decision here. I'll read from a couple of items on our rules of procedure in the standards that we have adopted.
Mr. Chairman, before you do that, if I could just say something.
Yes.
You're going to be reading some excerpts from the Board of Assessment Review Rules of Procedure and Standards from 2006. And to the extent that you skip something or abbreviate something and kind of condense it, it's the written word that controls so that there's no confusion. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's true. I'll start with number 3 of the D3. It says, the assessments, assessing methodologies, and an assessor's judgment are presumed valid. To overcome these presumptions, a taxpayer must prove the assessment is manifestly wrong. To prove manifest error, the taxpayer has the burden of proof to demonstrate one or more of the following. And there are 3, and in these proceedings, the one we're really dealing with is unjust discrimination. And it says, to meet the legal threshold of proof required to prove manifest error, where a taxpayer is claiming overvaluation, the taxpayer must, A, provide evidence and proof that the board accepts as sufficient and credible, which impeaches the validity of the assessment, and provide evidence and proof that the board accepts as sufficient and credible of the disputed property's fair market value. Only if the taxpayer satisfies both of these burdens is the board authorized to engage in an independent determination of the fair market value of the property for purposes of granting an abatement. D5 says the rule and remedy for a discrimination claim is that whenever it can be established indisputably by competent and sufficient evidence that a given assessment upon an aggrieved taxpayer's property has been laid upon and distinctly higher valuation than the assessments upon the property of taxpayers in general, and that his discrimination was intentional. The courts will intervene to reduce or annul the tax to the extent necessary to place the complaining taxpayer on a plane of equity with others in his class. Also, to obtain an abatement based on a discrimination claim, a taxpayer does not have to present evidence related to the actual fair market value to have their assessment reduced. Instead, the taxpayer must demonstrate the assessment system by its nature necessarily will result in unequal apportionment of the tax burden. A taxpayer can meet this burden by showing that a group of similarly situated properties were assessed at drastically lower valuations, that there are no distinctions between the properties that justify the disparity, and that any rationale that the assessor offers for the lower valuation is unfounded or arbitrary. Even so, sporadic or spot underassessments of other properties or errors of judgment on the part of the assessor are not adequate to support a finding of unjust discrimination or to grant an abatement. The results of a review of the assessment must show the assessor used systematic or intentional methods to create the disparity, and that the methodology or assumptions relied on by the assessor that led to the disparity were unfounded or arbitrary. Thus, some specific instances here or there, sporadic differences in valuations, or mere judgments, or mere errors of judgment by officials will not support a claim of discrimination. There must be something more, something which in effect amounts to an intentional violation of the essential principle of practical uniformity. Okay, I think that's about all I want to read out of those rules. Durwood, you have anything to add? Okay, having said that, I would now like to open up to all of us here some deliberations on this matter, if we may. And if anyone would like to start their thought process here on the board, would be great.
I think one of the things that we have to be mindful of in this is that this is a discrimination case, and we've heard a lot of evidence from both sides, and a lot of the information may suggest a certain ruling based on overvaluation, either for or against. And while it may be compelling information, it is not information that regards discrimination. And because of that, that information has to be disregarded in that aspect of the deliberations. The secondary thing that I think is really important was we have to look at whether the assessment processes were systematic or intentional in order to create a disparity in value between one group and another. And we have to look at if you have a discrimination case, one group is being discriminated against in favor of the other. So if we can identify who's being discriminated in favor of, I think it would be a little bit clearer to show whether there actually is a systematic difference between one group of taxpayers and another.
I would just add to what you just said, Alex, that when the law uses the word intentional, I don't think it means it in the sense of like a criminal law sense of word that the assessor went out and intentionally said, I'm going to punish one group. I think I think the intentional means more like not by accident,
Yes.
but not in the like sort of in the malum and say, the black heart sense of the word, like I'm intentionally out to get somebody.
But no, this is something that necessarily arises out of the system being used.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else, Alex? Do you want to add to that, or
I'll go next.
are you,
You-
time being? Yeah. Okay. Chris?
Okay, so the last 3 or 4 days, I've been pouring back through notes upon notes upon notes, and so I tried to break them down. I got it down to a page and a half of things that I thought were important, because there is a lot here. There's a ton here. So in doing that, I started looking back through it, what I kept finding over and over and over again in my notes. And then I made little spots of where they were and highlighted them and so on and so forth. And I came down to really 4 things that were, I guess I don't know the right word, but that I kept going back to in my mind as very important to me. And the words we just used, unfounded or not unfounded. What was convincing? What grabbed a hold of me? And so a couple of those things were the definition that Paul used for waterfront. And one of the things in there, if I quote it, if I can read my notes. Definition for assessing purposes of waterfront. If the parcel is situated so that no other building can be built between the parcel and the water. So in another spot I did find that this is an across-the-board thing. So this doesn't vary. Waterfront is waterfront by his standard all over the city of Scarborough, and he goes by that deliberately. Maybe somebody else has a different definition of what waterfront is, but he is doing it the same way for each of his waterfront properties. And that kept striking me, especially in the briefs. I wrote down 5 or 6 different places where this came up. 2, another huge one for me, the word Piper Shores and the Piper Shores neighborhood. I stopped writing down how many times I found this in different notes. But a couple things that stood out about that to me were everybody who testified in these hearings that I can remember I have written down agreed in some way or another, maybe in their own words, that Prout's Neck is and I'm going to quote one of them just for the sake of summing it up, Prout's Neck is a unique, exclusive neighborhood. There was another spot in there that talked about how the city assessed certain things on the same schedule, but each neighborhood is very different, and that Prout's Neck was even more so than some others, that it was unique and exclusive. And that was people on both sides that brought that up. So again, to kind of sum that up, in my mind, I had to take out those references to Piper Shores as comparison, because anything in that area, that's a different neighborhood. And last one I'll bring up for the sake of not talking to you guys all night long. Something that has come up in a lot of different discussions here over the last few months. But Mr. Ledoux, I'm glad that he was up there. He did testify. Scarborough's adjacent lot policy is common and supported by case law. And that is something that I've had in my mind over and over again over the last like 6 months. So to hear him say that meant a lot to me. And I'm gonna stop there. I'll just keep going all night. Nobody needs to listen to me all night.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Janie?
Shall I go, Ellen?
Yeah, just one second. I was thinking possibly you should discuss before you go, Vaney, about
State report.
the state report that was just mentioned here. What I, in regard to Attorney Block's objection to the state report that was, that allegedly some of us had, some didn't. So what we did, kind of take a assessment of where that came out, and it looked like all of us did except the one actually had the report in hand. However, all of us were here certainly for the testimony of Mr. Ledoux regarding the state report that was quite lengthy. So even though one of us didn't have the state report in hand, and the report specifically, we all can, I think my feelings are here, we all can rely on the testimony from Mr. Ledoux, because we all heard that, and that was, there was direct and there was cross, and then redirect and recross, so we certainly had that information. So that's like a thought I'd like to put out there. I'd like anybody to want to opine on that for a moment, and kind of take your thoughts on that. Manny, since you were going to talk anyway, maybe you can.
My thought is, I have not read the report. I'm the one member of the board who hasn't. But I did hear Mr. Ledoux testify, and I think that his testimony, from my perspective, is more important perhaps than the report itself. So I'm comfortable in my position that I've heard the man testify, and I've heard him be crossed and recrossed, and I find that a very persuasive piece of this proceeding.
Okay. Anybody else's thought on this topic from the board?
On the report?
On the report, yes, just on the report right now.
No.
I agree with what you said. I thought you summed that up well.
Okay. And Alex, anything?
Just briefly, I would say that the state report was not published. And the purpose of Mr. Ledoux's testimony was to explain partially why it was not published. And it wasn't published because of trying to hide some set of details. It wasn't published because they were trying to obscure some fact. It simply wasn't published because there wasn't much to it. There was no further reason in the state's view to continue investigating the situation. There wasn't a warranted reason to go further with it. So I would say that even in the absence of the report, Mr. Ledoux's testimony is more useful.
Okay, thank you, Alex. And Ben, did you have any additional comment?
No additional comments on the report. But
Okay.
I have additional comments on...
Can I just ask?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, before I forget it, there is one other procedural thing that I just wanted to make sure was cleared up on the record. At the January 7th meeting, Board Member Fuente had to leave early through no fault of her own, and I just wanted, if Kathy, if you would confirm that you did listen to the tape, or how you were able to review the rest of the meeting that
I
you missed.
logged on to the town website on Thursday evening following the meeting and watched more of the meeting than I really intended to watch, because I watched a lot of what I was here for, because I didn't find that little toggle to move it along to about 20 minutes before I left. I emailed the board to let them know that I had, in fact, watched the tape on that Thursday evening following that meeting. and I did note, I don't know if I noted it to everyone that I tried to email, but I sent Tracy, and I thought I did, that the date that the whatever is superimposed on the tape said January 6th, not January 7th. So I paid very close attention to the remainder. I watched it
Okay.
over and over again.
All right.
So,
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up to Durwood.
thank you.
All right. So I guess in summation on the report issue is I think we had a lot of information presented from both sides here on that we could, I think, make a fair decision on, irregardless of the report. However, those of us, it sounds like, that are relying more, are mainly on the testimony of Ms. Ledoux in the state report and not the report per se. Bainey.
In going back over all of the information submitted by attorneys on both sides, I have three specific, maybe four specific areas that I think are important. And the first is that in his opening remarks, Attorney Dale talked about the discrimination between the assessment at Prouts Neck and the lack of any additional assessment on the 16 properties between Prouts Neck and Higgins Beach, which are referred to in many of the reports that we have in front of us as the Piper Shores properties. The waterfront properties, the 16 properties, are waterfront, to be sure. They are expensive. They are larger in land area than the properties in Prouts Neck. But Prouts Neck is unique. Prouts Neck itself contains a private country club with an 18-hole golf course and tennis courts. It has a yacht club. It has a beach club. It's a very compact, well-defined community. The 16 properties going from Prouts Neck to Higgins Beach are scattered over an area of 2 miles. The 16 properties have no such amenities that are available to the residents of Prouts Neck. Prouts Neck is so well known that it is sought after by people from all over the United States, and I just went over the list of Attorney Dale and Attorney Block's clients and find that the appellants came from California, Florida, South Carolina, New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, Tennessee, Massachusetts, and I'm sure from many other communities, and also from Montreal. So I don't think that Prouts Neck and the 16 properties are really equivalent. I think there's a significant difference between the Piper Shores properties and Prouts Neck. The next thing that is important is the Prouts Neck sales versus the Carver sale. Now, the Carver sale was that property just to the west of Piper Shores, which is close to 40 acres, and closed in late April 2012, after the assessment date. The Carver sale was, the deputy assessor was questioned as to why the Carver sale should not have resulted in an assessment increase for the Piper Shores areas. And the deputy assessor indicated that it was after the fact and also that one sale doesn't necessarily trigger an assessment change for an entire neighborhood. And I agree with that. A single sale should not determine what an entire neighborhood gets assessed at. But if the appellants believe that one sale defines a neighborhood, in my opinion, how much more impressive are 8 sales which have taken place in the Prouts Neck waterfront area. The 8 sales, and this is the third point, the appellants have sought to discredit the 8 sales, and these are in Town Exhibit 4A, because the dates of some of the early sales and because some sales were claimed to be not arm's length. Mr. Ledoux, in his testimony, stated that the state does not ask what sales period the assessors use, but they are, or the state is results-oriented. He is much more interested in what the assessment picture looked like after the adjustments than he was in whether the adjustments were made from sales that were considered to be dated. Since the last townwide reval took place in '05 and adjustments were made in '06, I think the assessor should consider all sales between April 1, 2005 and April 1, 2012. But I also believe that he should attach significantly greater weight to the later sales. And in looking over Exhibit T4A, the 3 later sales, which we are talking about, is 1 to 2 Bohemia Way, 5 Richmond Road, and 21 Winslow Homer Road, which took place in from November 2010 to November 2011. Those 3 sales took place at an average of, see if I get this right, the average assessed value based on those 3 sales was only 79%. And I think it's important that the assessor look at this and realize that with the rest of the town close to 100%, that 79% is far short of where he should be. Ms. Craig characterized a number of sales as not arm's length transactions because properties hadn't been offered to the general public. Private sales are not uncommon. And in fact, the last real estate transaction I did was my own home in Massachusetts, which was a private sale. A buyer came along, son of a friend of ours, who thought that maybe someday, and knew we were going to move someday, and wanted to look at the house because it was near a golf course, and he liked to play golf. And after some negotiations, he offered us a price that we were comfortable with and that he was comfortable with paying. And so if a sale is consummated as a result of a willing buyer and a willing seller, and each acting prudently and knowledgeably and not affected by undue pressure or other circumstances, they should be considered as legitimate sales. Just because they weren't offered on the market does not indicate that they were not legitimate sales, in my opinion. The case of 31 Winslow Homer Road, where the buyer offered a $2 million premium over what the valuation was purported to be, I would certainly discount that sale. And yet, it's instructive to see that somebody came along to a property in Prouts Neck, which he, she, or they really wanted, and wanted to pay or make an offer which they couldn't refuse. Alan Greenspan would call this unwarranted exuberation,
Rational exuberance.
but it happened. And these things do happen from time to time. If somebody wants a piece of property badly enough, they will overpay to get it. And it's not only in the residential side, but the commercial side. In adjusting the assessments on the waterfront properties as of April 1, 2012, of the 8 properties in Exhibit T4A, only one sold for less than its assessed value, and that was 7 Seal Rock Drive, which sold only for 1.5% less. So I believe that the values that the assessor placed on the waterfront properties were appropriate. The paired sales on, and this is the flip side of the coin, the paired sales on Exhibit T4B indicate that the 2 properties were essentially the same value in 2006, 2007 than in 2010, 2011, meaning that while they hadn't lost value, as the appraiser who we heard talk indicated he thought they had, but they hadn't gained in value either. And I thought long and hard about why does this give the assessor some cause for concern before he goes out and raises the land value assessment. But I'm persuaded that with the town generally at close to 100% of value and the waterfront properties at close to 80% of value, the assessor really not only was justified but was compelled by fairness to increase the assessments, which he did. And those are my 4 points.
Thank you, Baney. I appreciate that clear and concise summation of yours. Alex, did you have anything further you'd like to talk about?
Yeah. Most of the notes that I've written down are somewhat similar to Baney's. The major aspect to me is that the Carver sale itself, even if we do consider it as a valid sale, is not indicative of the nature of the Piper Shores neighborhood. While the sales used to reevaluate Prout's Neck may all have their individual idiosyncrasies, you have to be able to interpolate a market trend between those points. Just because each sale on its own has some little irregularity doesn't mean that you can't see a general trend. And beyond that, the properties themselves are somewhat representative of the makeup of the Prout's Neck neighborhood. The other note that I had was similar to Baney's, is that the overall ratio of the town is the ultimate justifier of this endeavor to reevaluate some of the properties. We've heard some testimony that, to me, has tried to make it out that before the reassessment, the town was at a level playing field. And the data that we've been presented by Mr. Ledoux and Mr. L'Esperance don't really show that. They show that the waterfront properties have been reaping a benefit that the rest of the town has not. The rest of the town, previous to this reassessment, was actually the one being discriminated against by, having this higher sales ratio. And beyond this, I've seen, from the testimony put forth that any differences in the practice are neither systematic or intentionally discriminatory, and they're not unfounded or arbitrary. They're based on market data that Mr. L'Esperance had the duty as the assessor to try to, figure out where the market was going.
Is that it?
Yep.
Thank you very much, Alex. Kathy,
Yes, sir.
how
Thank
about
you.
you? Any thoughts?
I do. I, too, thought about a lot of the evidence. I spent a good portion of the past couple of weekends going through different exhibits, and the one thing that struck me is that we are here for discrimination, although we heard an awful lot of evidence about market value and market conditions in a recession, or whether it wasn't a recession. We're not here as a board, in my opinion, to determine whether each individual home is assessed to its market value. Mass appraisal in assessing is very different than the appraisal, in my opinion, of a single family, an isolated appraisal of a single family home. The evidence of the Carver property in Prouts Neck area, we heard testimony that that land is in agriculture or some type of special tax-saving state program that I think, in my mind, would eliminate that sale from consideration at all because of the unique nature and the vast fines that are imposed on taking a property that is in tree growth or farmland or open space protection out of that protection. For my opinion, the basis of equity is not equity from neighbor to neighbor, but equity townwide is what my understanding of what an appraisal process should develop. And I agree with the two gentlemen at the other end of the table that, you know, a lot of us in town have been paying 100 or 110% ratio on our properties, while there have been sections that in my opinion, the assessor addressed to bring those properties more in line with the ratio of other properties in other areas of town. He's not just concerned about this neighborhood or that neighborhood. The goal of an assessor is to do equity town-wide. And I agree with the gentleman at the end of the table that there were neighborhoods that evidence has shown that were assessed at a far lower ratio for a number of years compared to other residential properties in town. And in my opinion, it's a disservice to the other 6,000 or so residential people not to go with that opinion. And I think that's where I stand.
Okay, thank you very much, Kathy.
Thank you.
I appreciate you all taking, we had a lot of information to go through and take the time and to look at it and come to some, and do your homework and do some research and thoughtful consideration about tonight's deliberation, so I do appreciate that. And some of my thoughts obviously are going to overlap here on this panel, so I'll try to address some of the ones that haven't been addressed that I thought about. So I guess I started by saying, all right, was the assessor's methodology evaluation, did it show unequal apportionment? And I know the Prouts Neck revaluation certainly dealt with different assessment neighborhoods as they were called. The argument that was put forth, I believe, by Mr. Koukalakis regarding that a lot of properties fell outside of that 90 to 110% range of the assessment. I think that's, from on its onset, it's problematic to me because the assessor just has to utilize sales as they happen. I mean, they don't make the sales. It'd be a lot neater if they could. But so they can fall anywhere. So, however, the method that is in place for the qualifying these sales is this quality rating coefficient that we've heard a lot about in this reports, in the various paperwork and the exhibits. And that is the statistical measure of those variances. And obviously, the lower that number, it indicates that we have a tighter grouping, obviously. And so, was the reassessment fair vis-a-vis other waterfront properties and, in the bigger picture, other Scarborough properties? And I think from some of the evidence to me that was credible and persuasive was the town report that Bainey, I think, had already brought brought forth anyway, T4A and B. And if you look at those reports, that I think the average ratio pre and post the assessment confirmed that, in fact, it was a fair one. It went from 83, and then after the assessment was to 92. And then where the quality rating remained at, I think, 11%, which was low. And then I guess then there was taken one step further. They added the newer sales in subsequent to 2012, and that actually improved the average ratio from, initially it was 83, then went to 92, and then went to 93, and improved a little bit more. And the quality rating, I believe, improved as well. So we have something actually put in place. We have a methodology for testing how tight this grouping is, if they're effective, and it improved the grouping. So that, to me, was a litmus test that seemed to be persuasive. On the item of Piper Shore versus Prouts Neck area issue, I think, Bainey, for me, you hit the nail on the head in regard to that. All the points, I certainly agree with you. My notes to myself was that the assessor historically has taken different assessment neighborhoods, and Prouts Neck has been one of them. Higgins Beach area has been others, and so even within Prouts Neck, I mean, we have the Prouts Neck waterfront, Prouts Neck interior, inside and outside the gate. So it is these assessment neighborhoods that we've looked at. So clearly, to me, that the Piper Shore area is a distinct area from Prouts Neck, and both physically and really geographically. I mean, not that they're not nice, not that they're not valued, they're pricey, but it is a distinct, different area that needs to be looked at. I think it seems that there were insufficient and questionable sales, both in the assessor maintains. I think and it's a reasonable conclusion to adopt that, given the sparse sales, the different size lots, and the geographically distinct, being geographically distinct from Prouts Neck, I thought it was fair not to reassess those lots. I think certainly this area is an area that should be given some close scrutiny in the future. I think certainly it's a waterfront area, and it needs something to be looked at. Some other thoughts. There was issues brought up about the excess land issue. Was it discriminatory? I've stated here before that I think the practice needs to be clearer, certainly, and open to all taxpayers who fit into this category, not just those who ask. However, we have heard some testimony that other towns utilize similar strategies to deal with excess land. And also, I believe Mr. Ledoux acknowledged that the practice of having a system in place to deal with this excess land was acceptable. Some other thoughts of mine here. One thing I just wanted to add on to the Leslie Craig's testimony about some of those lots, some of those properties not being on the open market. I think we'd have to concur with Bainey that just because it wasn't on the open market doesn't necessarily make it not an arm's length transaction. In fact, I think I could make a good argument for the fact that if you put it on the open market, you'd add more competition, and thus you could have a higher price because there would be more people wanting to buy it as opposed to less. So there was one thought there on that subject. I think I'll get into that. I guess so. Given the information, all this information, I guess was the assessor manifestly wrong? Was the assessor's judgment, or was this thing manifestly wrong? And I think that the proof to me that was offered by the appellants to sort of impeach the validity of this assessment, it didn't really rise to a threshold that I would see that this assessment isn't an exact science. It's certainly subjective. However, in my opinion, I think the threshold to prove manifest error here had not been reached. So those are my thoughts. So, does anybody else have any other thoughts that they would like to present here? Durwood.
Just want to say a few words about the process. Your rules do allow you to designate someone, or the secretary to designate someone, like myself, to take what you've said and attempt to put that into words. I want to emphasize that if you would like me to write the conclusions and findings, I'm happy to do that. But it needs to be understood that this is your decision, and you're to scrutinize it as closely as you can. That's not something I can do right this second. It's going to, I think, have to come back to present that to you. I can send you a draft of it over by email, so you can have it to look at in advance of the meeting, but you should not deliberate about it by email. You should not exchange emails back and forth about it. To the extent that there's any, fine-tuning, you should do that. Fine-tuning or adding or subtraction, all those are very much encouraged. Do that at the meeting when those findings are discussed.
Okay.
And one other piece of housekeeping business is that Attorney Block and Attorney Dale had requested extension until January 22nd. I assume that they would agree to an extension to whatever the board agrees to.
Yes.
as the next meeting.
I'll send in an email.
Right. I'm
or
sorry to
tomorrow.
keep asking you for that, but it kind of
This
works
is
in
a-
your favor.
The Angel?
Fine.
Talking about the Angel?
Yeah.
No, we're talking about this. Our extension runs out tomorrow on the decision for this case.
Oh, for this case,
We'll
okay.
definitely
We need
extend
an
that.
extension for Angel, too. Okay.
Yeah. I think we actually have a longer period for Angel, but I could be wrong.
I'll
That's
extend them
fair.
both, just to
Yeah.
be safe.
Thank you. Okay, I think then the next,
Well, they're going to get to that now.
right, we need to figure a date and time that we all can reconvene to go through our finding of facts and then do a formal vote with the findings. Okay? So Tracy, I now turn it over to you to tell us what we have on slate already.
And our next meeting is February 11th for the Angel case.
Say that again?
Our next meeting is scheduled for February 11th to hear Angel.
That's our next one?
Other than that, we have no meeting scheduled.
Okay.
Would it be possible to do this portion of thing on the same evening as the 11th? Does that work for people, or do we think the Angel case is going to be too tedious?
Well, I think my druthers would not to do that on the same date, only because I don't sure how long it would go on. We've already postponed or slid Angel back. I don't want
Okay.
them to start subsequent to our deliberations. I'd like
Okay.
the deliberations to be first and foremost to get that through before we start Angel.
Okay.
So that would leave Tuesday, sticking with Tuesdays, the rooms open in
The
February.
28th is open. I have to get check
28th
my
is a
phone.
Friday.
I think she meant of January.
Pardon?
Do we need longer than next Tuesday?
Oh, in January?
No, I don't. I can have it by.
Is the space available, Tracy?
I don't have my January calendar. I don't think you
Yeah, I
could do
can't
it in January,
do the
summer,
28th.
February, March. I'd have to look.
Okay, then do we go to
February.
February 4th?
February
Is
4th
that available?
is-
No,
How about
Not.
the 5th?
Can we do a different night?
the 5th, no. You can do a different night, but the 5th would not work.
Okay. 6th, which is a Thursday night.
I can
I-
do the 6th.
I can do the 6th.
I can't do it, I'm sorry.
No.
Okay. How about
How about the
The-
30th?
the 12th or 13th of February, which would be a Wednesday or a Thursday?
Well, that doesn't get us, you wanted to do this before we heard Angel. Is that
Oh, no, I
correct?
just didn't want us to
Do it in the same-
deliberate
Oh, on the
before
s-
Angel.
Oh,
On the same night.
On the same
on the
night,
same
before the same
evening. I'm
night.
sorry, I misunderstood.
The 12th, no.
Apologies.
The 13th, you could.
13th is a
It's a
Thursday.
Thursday.
Free on the 13th,
13th,
I
no?
think.
I can do the 13th.
It's Valentine's Day Eve.
On
That's the
13th?
14th.
That's the 14th, dear.
No, I said Valentine's Day Eve.
Oh, sorry.
Don't get fancy.
The 13th?
13th?
Chris?
Yep. Sounds good.
Kathy?
It's Friday Eve at my house.
13th?
13th, fine.
Rob?
I think we're good.
Time.
Everybody okay with that? Both?
What
okay.
time?
13th?
Time.
Bill, Sue, Paul? Am I hearing all nods here? Okay. So, 13th
13th.
at
February.
February 13th at,
And that's Friday Eve at my house.
can we do 6:30? Kathy, right, 6:30, okay?
Yes,
Okay,
that's fine.
6:30.
What time are we doing Angel?
6:30?
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
All right. And Jonathan, you're going to give us the extensions to send that so we can deal with those?
Tonight or tomorrow.
Okay.
Um,
That's
just-
my extension. You need it in writing, there it is.
I'd rather send it from the office so I get a copy and all that.
I thought that was some sort
We can
of,
take a picture and email
quite
it
what
to
that
you.
was.
the open report or something.
You're done.
Until,
Does anyone else
Through-
celebrate Friday Eve
Through Fe-
other than me?
what does that say?
I think it says
September?
You will after
February
that.
28th.
February
Thursday
28th.
night.
Through,
It's the weekend.
Attorney Dale's given, just for the record, the Attorney Dale's given a written request for an extension to February 28th, 2014, extension of the board's time to make its decision. I think the board has always granted these extensions.
Yes.
So I'm not supposed to ask you for it, I think.
Right,
You guys are
we're asking.
Sending.
Wait, well,
And I'll use the same date, and I'm just
Yes.
going to send it in by email. Is that 28th enough time to
Right.
finish this?
right. I don't see that, yes.
Right.
I
Okay.
don't see anybody raising that as a procedural issue down the road.
Is there, okay, we did that. Any other things we need to do?
No, I think that covers it.
Any other thoughts from the board here?
Oh, just one other thing. Just want to make sure the attorneys, I think they spent some time with Kathy, I'm sorry, Tracy, but after the last meeting to make sure that all the exhibits are properly in the record, and there's no disagreement at this point about what's in and what's out, except for about the state report. There's a disagreement about that, but otherwise, everything's in and the parties agree on what's in.
You got my list, Bill and John?
Yes.
Yeah, the one issue I have, everybody, is I had some color photographs, and I only had one set. I think I gave them to Tracy, so
Yeah.
as long as Tracy has that, and we'll double check with you to make sure. So if your master set has got everything,
All
because
right.
some of these may only just be one.
I remember
Most
that.
things, we made them a copy, and they made us a copy, but a couple of those, I just had one copy of.
Okay. All right. Thank you all. Can I entertain a motion to adjourn?
I will motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second?
I'll second it.
Alex, second it. All in favor? All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.